Go. Hey, good day to a new episode of Cruising with Phil after the by-election's over. Glad to be back and doing my interviews. My next guest, I met this man at the high school raising the pride flag, and a fellow Americana, good guy. I like his spunk, I like his spirit, I like his ideas. He's amazing. Talked to him first time, first impressions, just like I was interviewed on his pod called By a Thread because it's available on YouTube. Check it out. And it's good to have you here. Hey, Mitchell, nice to see you. First
Hey,
time back.
Philip.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank you so
coming.
much
Yeah,
for the introduction.
yeah,
I'm glad to be here. You're a fascinating person with so much experience, and
and
I'm
yourself as well.
always, hey, I'm always glad to speak with people and discuss ideas of community collaboration. And it feels like we're living in some very historic times. Like it,
Yeah,
it feels like a mass extinction event. Philip, did you hear about the rivers of ice crashing through Italy recently?
yeah. Something I didn't. Is there a video? I didn't see. I heard
Yeah,
about.
there
Yeah,
was there was a video of these pieces of ice floating through the streets of Italy, which have been flooded.
yeah, yeah. I saw a bit of I heard. I didn't see. I heard about that. I heard about the other two ships that crashed into each other, not too far off.
Ooh, yeah. And then there was 300 milliliters of rain in Halifax.
Yeah, that's why I should live there. I know the area well. Oh my God. I know people out there right now that are suffering. Bedford. I was not too far from there, outside of Dartmouth there. I used to go get my fish there, my fresh lobster every day, every week. Oh,
Yeah, you could truly be cruising.
oh man, yeah, yeah. I mean, they need to be cruising over there. I just feel bad for them. What they people understand like how the land over there is. It's all hilly there, right? So there's patches where water does collect through it, but they have a drainage system. But because of the amount of water, they just couldn't keep up. And that's why people ask them how they get flooded. They thought Halifax is all flat. So no, the Halifax is not flat. It's all hilly over there. It's very it's more hilly than Ontario and Toronto. But anyways, I feel for them and prayers, and I hope the get on there and get some relief going. We need some major relief. I don't think it's going on with the government. I haven't anything but relief or the what's that company called? FIFA? No, not FIFA. Soccer. The company that helps out there. But I talked to people back there. A lot of East Coasters there, a lot of retired guys and women I know there. It just struggling, you know. But you know what I like about this community of living there, learn living there, just the community spirit. And I got that from there. Just the old saying is, "There's always room at the table," and that's I stuck with that all the time. You know, they help each other out no matter what frustrations or anything get into. That's they're known for that. Come together and they just there's no judgment on each other. They just help each other out. So I'm sad for them, but I also know they're strong people. They're a strong community. Halifax, East Coasters best workers I work with in the military, besides Quebec, but best bunch of guys and girls I work with. But I got a lot of what do you call it? I guess livability and about community spirit from there, specifically them. Yeah. So yeah, Bedford. Yeah, I lived there. I know the area well. I'm like, oh my gosh, wow. So hopefully it'll get better. I think it will. But they're tough. They're tough.
Yeah. It's always fascinating to try to figure out how we can prepare. And we have all of these scientists and engineers and people always trying to push forward the fact that we've needed to look at the ice storm in Toronto we had or
Oh
threat
yeah.
to GTA. We still haven't updated the transformers. We still haven't done a lot of the mechanical and climatological reinforcements we need for something that now is effectively inevitable. We've gone from people saying it's not real, climate change or stuff like that, to saying, oh, it's not going to be so bad, or oh, we've dealt with flooding before. But it's strange. We live in a world where we have jetpacks now, but we can't deal with flooding. We live in a world with flying cars, but we still have homelessness. It,
Look
it, it
at
feels
the,
like,
I know. Look at the Don Valley Parkway. Every time there's a flooding, buses shut down, subway shut down, all that. It's still flooding to this day. They haven't solved that problem or what? They're still working on it. Like, how many years has that been, right?
yeah, I think we're what, 10 years away from the Jetsons now, or was
I
that in
know.
2060 or 2050? Like, and George Jetson worked a 16-hour work week. And back in the 18 and 1900s, they were always talking about how the work week would naturally get smaller. I think at the end of the day, like it feels like we're not pursuing true development. We're pursuing a different motive in society.
You're living
At
off.
least,
You're like for the Jetsons. I'm a Hanna-Barbera fan. I grew up with one of the cartoons. I also draw the cartoons as well. But you're the opening scenes of Jetsons where he gets out of a spaceship or whatever. He takes the moving sidewalk, goes to the office. He gets sits on the chair and he puts his feet up. Like, he goes like that's a, like I look at it, I go like that must be hard work get off that ship going to that sidewalk and just sitting there relaxing. Hey, boy, that was a long morning for the guy. Well, that's where it's becoming. Everything's automated, right? But you're right. We're like kind of like we're progressing, but we're kind of like we're kind of like living off old ideas and old things that don't work anymore, and we just can't get past it. I don't know if follow stuff going on in Europe. I mean, look at the Netherlands. Well, have they dealt with dikes and flooding and all? And look at it. Well, look at Venice. It's constantly sinking, and they're still trying billions to keep it up, right? I said just build a dam around it and build some dune. What do you call it? I can't remember the word, but anyways, just take the water out of the area. That's all you do. It's a major thing, but solve it. You're not gonna solve it by keep lifting it up. It just keeps sinking.
and then you'll see something like the Notre Dame that gets $3.2 billion raised
Yeah.
for it when it's already insured, and then actual climate relief for climate infrastructure gets millions of dollars when we live in a world where people are approaching trillions of dollars. Um, but yeah, we did meet to get back to our relationship
Oh
and
yeah.
to get
And
back.
tell people who you are and what you're all about. From what I know, yeah. Yeah.
My name is Mitchell Toye. My friends call me Mickey, and you can too, audience members. I ran in Toronto's special by-election as a mayoral candidate, mostly because I wanted to get the emails. But I was able to get 72 votes without really spending any money, which is a pretty good dollar per vote ratio. Um, I was able to meet people like Philip, Isabella Gamk, Jeffrey Tunney, Bahira Abdul Salam, um, and even met with people I very much don't agree with. And I was able to become slightly viral on TikTok with about 360,000 views on a video where I said, money isn't real, and I'll spend as much of it as possible to save as many lives as possible. And I explained how many countries bring on a deficit and how a city like Toronto that probably makes $72 billion in revenue every year doesn't have to worry about a $3 billion deficit, especially when that deficit that we're raising isn't even getting people homes. The major factors of my campaign were Indigenous sovereignty, socialized health, housing, and effectively creating community care. I don't think anybody should be starving on this planet right now. I don't think anybody should be homelessness on this planet right now. And I think we have way more than enough resources, and we have been, at least according to global trade data from the 1960s, that we've had enough resources to feed, house, clothe, and educate every human being on Earth for about 60 years now. And that poverty is a tool of power. That's effectively my thing. I'm 28 years old. I studied interdisciplinary social sciences at York University. I studied general arts and sciences at George Brown College. I was accepted to cognitive neuroscience at U of T, but it was $50,000 a year. And I will just say that I only have $30,000 of school debt right now, and I probably could have had 200,000 if I decided to go that route. I When I was running for mayor during the election, I was primarily focused on discussing things with other mayors, trying to shift their platforms, and speaking to the public openly about what we could do. But it was a great experience. I feel like I learned a lot, and hopefully, I'm trying to do my best to work with some of the people that I met on writing some literature about the process so that it's easier for other people that want to try again next time we have an election.
Oh, like a mayor to be guide or whatever.
Yeah, I think that a prospective title I'm thinking about is How to Run for Mayor and Lose While Having Fun, or
I
How
was
to
gonna
Run
say the same thing.
or How to Run for Mayor and What You Can Do Instead. But I think from the most part, what I think was the most valuable part of the experience was seeing how much people wanted change or really would respond to these ideas. And it feels like at the end of the day, the choices we have between the liberals, the conservatives, and the NDP is either put the knife in further, pull the knife in out a little bit, or pull it out a little bit more. But none of the options are take the knife out and close the wound, which I think is an apt metaphor for indigenous sovereignty and really reconciliation as a whole, as well as dealing with poverty. But that's basically me. I've definitely not lived a perfect life. Plenty of mistakes, plenty of things I'm currently dealing with. I still haven't gotten my glasses fixed, but it's from the support of my friends and family that I continue to do what I do. And I'm still just trying to get a job and make it in this city, but it's difficult. It's difficult making it in Toronto.
Interesting what you said
But
about the.
that's a little bit about me.
That's so cool. No, that's a lot. That's nice. Very impressive. Yeah, I read about you before, but I got on the interview. I talked about the indigenous. Let's go back to the indigenous. That's the big thing for me, and as well as you, right? I gotta ask you a question, and I'm first time asking this question. What do you think of when they do when they ever have a council meeting or anything going on, or they always acknowledge the landowner, the original landowners of the peoples? What do you think about that?
I think the funny thing about land acknowledgements is like it's like saying, yeah, we know we stole this. We're not going to give it back, but we'll admit that we stole it. I remember my friend Clayton Wells, who's a lawyer, I think on the West End of Canada in British Columbia. He talked about the fact that the the defense attorneys and uh, the British Columbian government does not want to acknowledge the fact that Vancouver Island is unceded territory. And if they did, if they even saw the papers proving it, they effectively have to do it. So whenever indigenous nations try to prove this point, they just completely stonewall it. They ignore it. They don't open any of the letters because they know as soon as a legal case is started, they're effectively going to lose. And I think that kind of understanding that our governments know they don't have the authority, but are just playing see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, trying to just hide from their responsibilities. And I think it's detestable. But one of the things I always say to my friends is the more you know, the angrier you get when it comes to the modern world. What are your feelings about the land acknowledgements?
I lived on the island for 2 years there in Victoria with the military. It's funny you mentioned, but they don't recognize that whole island is all native, same original names: Manitoulin Island, Chicoutimi, or not Chicoutimi, Esquimalt. These are all even the streets, little clips of towns on that particular island. Anywhere you go, it's indigenous. You can feel it as soon as you arrive there. And it's funny people don't realize that there's a national international water line just south of the island. So if any boats go past a certain line, it's called international waters. And the funny thing is, the indigenous own that area, but people don't talk about it, right? We were on the ship. We used to sail on the ship. We had two guys. One of us from one of the Five Nations there. We got one Iroquois, and I can't remember the Cherokee. And these two guys just make jokes. Hey, listen, we're going to our land property now. You got to like give us proper respect. We had a joke about that, but it's funny. International waters is a big thing still. It's still uncharted because you can't claim it unprotected. Look at Alaska. Like you talk about, these balloons they're talking about, these spy balloons coming over the last few months.
Oh, yes.
Well, that's been going on for years. People ask me in the military, like, they're spying on us? Yeah, they do it all the time. Every country spies on each other. It's not a big deal anymore. You know?
We have satellites going across the earth taking pictures all
Yeah.
the time.
We have Russian subs coming over every year under the radar. But we don't talk about that, right? That's like going to the fear
Speaking
factor.
Speaking of that, have you heard the thing about Garush or Garush who was saying that, oh yes, we've recovered UFOs and the pilots were non-human. I heard some people speculating that they think that it's not true, that it's just the United States saying that they have them to intimidate people. What are your whole feelings about the fact that it feels like such a wild time in history. We have the United States government confirming UFOs and then confirming non-human bodies, but then we also have people saying that these confirmations are just political theater, that they're to intimidate other nations from feeling like the US has reverse engineered this technology.
Well, you see, they made the announcement they're doing an investigation about the UFOs. Going to the military files and all that stuff. I was like, that's kind of a joke. People ask me if I've ever seen a UFO. No, I've never seen one in my life. I've talked to pilots that they say they've seen things when flying, unexplainable. Nothing like, not a flying disc or something like that, but just natural. Some things are natural phenomena. Like a lot of things are a
Yeah.
reflection of things. There's a lot of metals on the ground that people don't realize that actually reflect. Well, look at the Northern Lights. That's a reflection of, water and light and all. So like things that you see out of obscure that like it's supernatural. It's not really. It's actually part of the Earth's resources that we're not even aware of it. That actually happens. So I really do I believe in UFOs? Possibly. It kind of ignorant to say we're the only life forms on the whole universe, right? Or the whole galaxy.
It
So
just seems strange that aliens would have the technology to get millions of light years to here, but then not be able to handle being around here and crash, or be even noticed by us. But another interesting thing is, I remember reading in I think it was Skeptic magazine or Science magazine that there was a high corroboration between CO2 poisoning in your home and thinking you have a ghost. And so
oh
if you think you have a ghost, you might have it like a gas leak, or you
yeah
might
yeah yeah.
have and also uncovered electrical wire. Electrical wire that isn't insulated causes visual and auditory hallucinations that people sometimes think are aliens or ghosts. And
Oh,
it's just fascinating because and then I remember seeing online somebody said, "Oh, no, 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 it's the brain damage that causes you to see the ghosts that are still there. You need your brain to be damaged. It's like the same kind of thinking of like, oh, children see ghosts or old people see ghosts because the brain is failing, and our brain just filters out all the crazy unexplainable phenomena,
I met
which
somebody
is
in BC.
fascinating. But I don't think it's true, but I think it's fascinating.
Well, I met a guy in BC, and I invited him over dinner with his girlfriend, and he said, he told me I got confined with you. He's coming over dinner. He says, I gotta tell you, I never told you this, but I think I was abducted by an alien. I said, oh, really? So I said, how do you feel that about Phil? I said, well, okay, well, does that mean I have to have an extra serving for the table or what? I was kidding. I was trying to be supportive. I mean,
Did
so
what was his experience like? Did you ever have him on the show?
no, I didn't have a pod back there. It was just still in the military. He came over and he was telling a story that just before he met his girlfriend, that he went to some field outside the base there and he got abducted and he came back and he felt younger and all this stuff. And I said, well, too bad you didn't have your freaking what's that? What do you call those points cards? They have it at the grocery stores. Your redeeming
The
card.
reward cards, yeah, or
I
optimum
I try to be
cards.
supportive, but I don't mean to make fun. I mean, he could have had experience. He could have had a an out of matter experience. Have you heard of that? About
Out of body experiences, yeah.
or bilocation? Have you heard of bilocation?
Yeah, didn't they make a documentary about that? Men Who Stare at Goats in that book where
Well, yeah, it's kind of a crude. Yeah, yeah, but they basically, well, especially like as a Catholic, we're in about bilocation saints and all, meaning you're still there, but you're in another, with your another presence goes in another area. They've actually proved some incidents like with some of the saints and some of the historical figures back then. They can't explain it. There's still things they can't explain. I don't know. Do you believe in ghosts or something? I know you ask people this on an interview.
I think that energy cannot be created or destroyed. So I feel like we might leave imprints. Like
Yeah,
I
that's
feel
yeah.
that
Imprints is a big thing. Yeah.
we also know from studying the electromagnetic fields of horses that they interact with people. And it's kind of like prey animals like rabbits actually have a lot larger electromagnetic radiuses than humans do. A lot
Mhm.
of prey animals do. But humans and a lot of other animals, usually predators, but sea creatures, we have these fields. I think that maybe they can have some sort of effect, but I don't think it would be any form of consciousness or afterlife. It would be more like a memory or an echo, and that's only hypothetically if they do exist.
Yeah.
But I always thought if there was an experience I had in my childhood where around the same time in March that my great great grandmother passed along, my grandma Brown, she had very bad arthritis, and I was the only child that wasn't afraid of her shaking. All the other children were a bit timid around her, but I wasn't afraid at all. Um, she the day that she died, I woke up in a start and I saw like this white haze, and it felt like I couldn't breathe for a moment. And and then immediately when I saw the haze, I wasn't afraid. I was a bit perplexed. And I was only 8 years old. It could have been like an aneurysm, or it could have been just some sort of strange event. But it was the timing of it that always was interesting. And I didn't get a phone call or anything about her dying. I found out when I came back from Nova Scotia, funny enough, um, that she passed along, and it was around the same time. And there's a lot of explanations. If I was feeling romantic or science fiction-esque, I would say that perhaps we had some sort of quantum entanglement, and that's because have you ever heard that quantum bits can create relationships or bonds that even if they were on the other side of the
Yeah, like
universe, one
well,
moving would
like animals.
affect the other?
We talked about them in another meeting. Animals is a big thing, right? The echolocation, echo communication. How do animals go from create? I have some experiences too about animals as well. Like you said about like my aunt died in England when I was in in the East Coast when I was in my teen or late teens in the reserves. I was with my buddy there in New Brunswick, and I was doing my family tree with my aunt in England. I never met her personally. I just did my family tree with my mom's side, and it went back and forth for a couple months. And I went to stay with them 2 months, and then he had this dog there, a little dog, little runt dog there, and then she didn't like anybody. Only go to Steve, my friend. So one night I'm sitting there, and this dog, I was only there 2 months. The dog never came by anyway. The dog hopped on the couch and put his head on my lap and just would not move. And his grandmother saying, couldn't believe that. Hey, that's something. And at that point, the phone rang from Toronto, and my mom told me that my aunt Thelma had passed away in England. So I don't know. You can explain it as metaphysical with animals, how animals have a consciousness and awareness about the energy thing or whatever. But that animal would not move the whole night for the whole night. But that dog would never come around anybody. So it was something to see. So to that day, I questioned that about
Well,
that.
when it comes to spirituality and all of those factors, one of the things that always is fascinating to me is aspects of like ancient yogic traditions or aspects of Buddhism or even like Christianity, like Abrahamic religions, and they're things that I think human beings felt intuitively that they couldn't explain, and we didn't have the measurement tools to have. And I feel like those things will always exist. Even no matter how far our species exists, there's always going to be the fringes of the unknown.
Yeah. And
And we can
we try to solve have the the absolute we have to know the answer to everything. Why does this happen? Why did they have experience to your grandmother or my dog or whatever? I think the more we try to look into the unknown and try to explain it, it just becomes more difficult. We just let go with the flow, let it happen, and just experience and enjoy it and just reflect on it. That's what I always say.
I think the story is more important or effective than anything you think it may have been. The fact that
Yeah,
it did happen is what's interesting. But then it brings us to a factor like this. If we're going to say those are spiritual experiences or those are supernatural
but
experiences,
even like
then
But even Mitchell, you said the word like even the words, these words we use in context, like they're so sometimes hell out of proportion. Like when we study philosophy, spirituality, ghosts, metaphysics, all these are just words that we use or used to as humans. We're conditioned, so we limit ourselves using these words.
signifiers.
Yeah, we limit ourselves by using these words to justify what happens up beyond that we can't explain. So we say spirituality. It's not even spirituality. It could be like you said, electric magnetism, something like that. That's even another limited word, right?
Words to justify how
Yeah,
things are. Have you ever heard and I have this intense urge to say it is what it is. Have you ever heard the phrase thought obliterating cliche?
yeah.
Like we we always want to either dismiss or categorize things. And it's just like that in politics too, which is why both of us like running, and we like associating with people that also are in this kind of world or in this struggle to try to make things better in the ways that they believe. But at the end of the day, no individual is going to have the perfect ideas. And every mayor that I've respected has said that they would work with their community, that they would work with evidence, that they would work with what works. But I feel like people will also make conclusions that aren't fair to them. People will say things like, I'm bad at this, or I'm bad at that. And what they mean is, I don't have experience with this thing, or I tried it and I failed, forgetting that their entire life, walking is something that they tried and failed. You have to go forward. I think that words are definitely a imperfect tool, but they're an important one. I think that politically right now we're dealing with a lot of apathy. We have record high depression, record high suicide, record high homicide, cancer rates are high, Alzheimer's rates are high, and this is beyond the degree of diagnosis. So our diagnostic abilities have gotten better, but also the rates of these illnesses, of these issues has gone higher. And I think effectively we have to understand that we can no longer make excuses or try to dismiss our curiosity or our urge for change, but rather we have to do our best to move forward and to develop what we think we can do in our everyday lives, which I think would be a great segue into the second half of our interview, which would be more about action, understanding, and what the everyday person can do if they don't want to run for office. Because at the end of the day, I think one of the most important things I did with my platform, or when I was speaking or campaigning, was saying at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who becomes mayor. What matters is how will the public influence them and keep them out of the hands of oligarchs or other interests that will put them ahead of their own. There was actually a study recently, I believe, from the University of Cambridge that showed that the average person has less than 1.1% of an impact on Congress and Senate in the United States, while billionaires and lobbyists that then can get politicians jobs at their lobbying firms have 30 to 40% of an impact. But even if something had complete majority support, let's say food for children, or food being a universal right, that only makes it likely to get passed by 30%. It's horrifying. While lobbying can get something 80%, we have to figure out and we have to communicate to people that we need to dispel this fear we have of each other. I think there's this deep sense of resentment to other people. We all are waiting for somebody else to save us, for somebody else to reach out to us. And people always feel exhausted for this. Why do I always have to message my friends to hang out? Why do I always have to go to my neighbors to get them to speak to me? And I think at the end of the day, this is the same thing as any cognitive bias. We focus on ourselves and and we focus on either the bad times or the good times. But at the end of the day, we have to find a loving, living joy in interacting and the adventure of knowing those around us. And we have to figure out programs and mantras or even just fun online resources like your website. It inspires people to both visually and in terms of your reasoning to push for and advocate for tool cafes, and like cafes where people can fix their bikes and get food either for free or subsidized, or places where people can bathe. And it's these kind of dreams. I was actually reading a book that I will bring up right here, by Stokely Carmichael, later known as Kwame Ture, which is Ready for Revolution. And in the introduction, they discuss how freedom is something we will always strive towards, no matter how free we are, because it's like striving for Paris. And they say Paris, P-A-R-E-E, instead of Paris, spelling it Paris. I feel like because we will never be fully emancipated by any government official. We'll never be fully given our ability to develop ourselves from an outer power. Um, it was John Edgar Wideman, and I think that I would love to quote it directly because I think it's too beautiful not to. In Black Skin, White Masks, Frantz Fanon explained that for marginalized Black people, the first step away from oppression must be obtaining basic necessities: food, shelter, work, health, security. But without the next step, an emergent critique of self and society, the old order of exploitation that breeds the wretched of the earth will remain in force, even if a large number of Americans could liberate themselves from handicaps imposed by racial, gender, and class inequities. These inequities wouldn't disappear, neither inside the minds of individuals who pull themselves up by their bootstraps, nor in the material circumstances of other Americans who don't make it up the economic ladder, nor in the global economy where marginalized people will be recruited to fill the underclass necessary to maintain luxury for a few, here and abroad. In the absence of a new vision Fanon calls for, oppression simply migrates or creates a class of perpetual migrants, stateless, without rights, doing every nation's dirty work. In this situation, the psychological and moral landscape of each of us, haves or have-nots, deteriorates. Greed, fear, hate, cynicism, desperation proliferate. And I think John Edgar Wideman's words in 2003 in New York have only gained greater weight, as have Kwame Ture's words, with time. I feel like no matter who you kill, if you killed every corrupt politician, a new set of them, just like a row of shark's teeth, will grow in if the system that enables the corruption remains in place. And to say something I usually chant on the streets, as I did when I was running in the election: no one can be free until we are all free. And I feel like the only revolution that will count, the only revolution that will save us, is a revolution of the mind and the heart. If we can't truly get people to understand that we can do this on our own, there's no one whose permission you need. It is rather, what love can you give? Kind of like a bastardization of John F. Kennedy's statement: do not ask what we can do, what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. But rather than saying country, I would say that the modern development of that phrase, and I believe John F. Kennedy was a good person trying to do his best, and that's, I think, tied to why he was assassinated. But I think that to adapt it to the modern day, do not ask what you can do for yourself, but ask what can be done for yourself by doing for others. When we see ourselves not as individuals surviving the tide of the other, but rather ourselves a neuron in the brain of society, ourselves a cell in the beating heart of humanity, we understand that any process we do with love and care and effort, a damned playful seriousness, as a wise man once said, like the composition of music, when we no longer tolerate jobs that rip our souls, when we no longer tolerate exploitation, when we no longer tolerate that which demeans us, but rather work out of solidarity and necessity and care and love, I think those are the kind of tenets and methods and ideas that lead us to the actions we need, which I would love to elaborate on in the second part of our interview, because I
Yeah,
see that we only have 2 minutes
yeah,
left.
let's just do let's get me into this whole stuff about philosophy and all that. Let's do the second part. We'll cut off now. We'll continue on so we can add a little, go back and forth. I got a couple of things you want to add to your stuff there. So let's end this now. We'll go to the second part right away. Okay. So I'll be
Sounds
back.
good.
Yeah. Bye.